Is this an inflection point in the war coming off of that post from Donald Trump in which he suggested Ukraine could actually win this?
In a word, yes.
Okay.
Okay. So in the last couple of weeks, we've seen NATO airspace be invaded by Russian drones and Russian fighter pilots.
Yeah.
And we see this in Hungary today. There's accusations in Hungary. But I'll go straight to the quote that you showed from Moscow. So Moscow is blaming, they're blaming the West, Joe, which is kind of amusing because they created the problem. They're saying that this is escalation and that it's unacceptable, but they're the ones that caused it, right?
Yeah.
This is typical. This is what they do over and over again.
We're no strangers to this. Our aircraft have been intercepting Russian bombers over Alaska for the last 40 years or something, right? What was the aim here, though? Was it an attempt to divide NATO, thinking that Viktor Orban wouldn't have any part of this conversation, or is it just Putin being Putin?
I think Putin feels like he can get away with it and there's no consequences. So he's I think this is NATO country number 4 that he's sent either drones or fighter pilots over in the last month. So we see him upping the ante, and he hasn't really faced any consequences other than the Estonians. The Estonians did escort those 4 Russian fighter jets out, and they called a meeting at NATO, and it was the first time the Estonians had ever done it.
Amazing. We talked to Estonia's foreign minister a couple of days ago from the UN, knowing the visceral emotion that Estonians feel, the memories they have of Russians rolling down the street and literally shooting their then parents or grandparents, the occupation that followed. They see that as being possible again, don't they?
Right, they do. History is alive. And history, I think in an American sense, we tend to think of history as this beautiful thing where it's constantly getting better. And that's not the Eastern European view of history.
Right.
The Eastern European view of history is dark, Joe. And it wasn't that long ago. And people have this lived memory. And you see the same thing in Poland, right? You see Radek Sikorski's message this week. And he's telling the Russians, we're going to shoot anything down that you fly over our airspace. So it's not even backroom deals, it is direct signals.
Yeah, we're saying it out loud. So is that the right move right now? What would happen if somebody shot down a MiG-31? What would Putin do?
Nothing.
Really?
Yes.
You're sure of that? Because so then it's not an escalation in this case.
Well,
it's a measured response.
This is a classic Russian textbook exercise. They are trying to scare us. They have a weak hand right now because Donald Trump has decided, for many good reasons, and I hope we'll get into that discussion, that he supports Ukraine. He is sick and tired of Vladimir Putin's lies. He tried for 6 months. He didn't make any progress on negotiations. And we saw today, or we saw this week, that Trump is throwing in for Ukraine. So what happens? Dmitry Medvedev starts talking about using nuclear threats again. We can. I mean, we're at Bloomberg. We can put this on a graph. Anytime the Russian hand is weaker, then they resort to escalation.
Is Medvedev
and
already
threats
out there, or you're just remembering the last time?
It is a mathematical relationship. I'll draw it for you next time I come in.
Okay, very good. There's an equation here. Talk to us more about what motivated Donald Trump, because you know that the line in Washington is he's going to talk about or believe in the message that came from whoever talked to him last. He talked to President Zelensky that day that he sent that post. Did Zelensky somehow convince him of this, or were there other voices in his ear?
There were other voices. So President Zelensky is a masterful communicator, but it's not right to give him full credit. Okay. So we've talked a lot about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is not ideological. He can swing back and forth, as you well know, and that drives many people crazy, and it makes it good to be an analyst in Washington, Joe. So to be serious for a minute, though, there are different voices within his administration. We see Keith Kellogg, General Keith Kellogg, and he's a hawk, and he has Vladimir Putin's number, and he is talking to President Trump regularly. And then we see J.D. Vance, and he has an opposing view, and he wants to make a deal, and he wants the war over as soon as possible. So we see these two camps, but there's more people, right? This is a complicated situation. It's been going on for months. The person we haven't talked about, and I think the most influential person, and we're starting to see more and more of her, yes, her influence, is Melania Trump.
How about that?
Melania Trump doesn't make much of herself in foreign policy matters. But
remember what she wrote about the children.
Right, right. Melania Trump knows what's going on. And we saw this earlier this year where she's talking to Donald Trump about the bombings. And we've seen a massive escalation of Russian bombing of civilian targets, of hospitals, schools, children, churches. Melania knows what's going on. And we saw Donald Trump reveal this. But there's more to it, Joe. Her two best friends are Ukrainian American.
Is that right?
Yeah.
This is fascinating. Look beyond the policymakers then, or the officials at the DOD. It's what he hears when he goes upstairs to the residence at night. I haven't heard that before.
It's a big piece. So we know that Donald Trump is also, he's not the most moral man, I think is the most polite way I can put it, but he does have a moral conscience. And I think that this issue of children resonates strongly with Melania. Melania is traditional. She's an Eastern European woman, and she's made a lot out of being a mother to Barron, and that's her priority. And she knows about this issue. More than 20,000 Ukrainian children have been abducted by Russia.
That's right.
And we saw her write about it, and she's talking to Trump about it. And I think that issue there is real resonance there with both of the Trumps.
President Zelensky talked about a weapons system that he asked President Trump for when they met. One, he said, that could help to end the war, that would put Kremlin officials in bomb shelters. Do we know what that is, what the ask was that he made?
We don't know what the system is, but I can tell you there are a couple of easy things that would end the war.
Okay.
If Washington said...
Easy things.
Let's do it, yes. I mean, bring some generals on here, and they'll tell you.
What do you have?
Long-range rockets.
Okay.
Long-range rockets will end this war. So you need to enable the Ukrainians to strike behind enemy lines and hit command and control centers. It's a matter of logistics. If the Ukrainians had the ability to hit, they need German Tauruses and they need long-range ATACMS.
Okay,
and they need the ability to hit anywhere that they need the ability to hit into Russia.
Yeah. Producer James just put a story in front of me here from Axios. This is since we came to air. Zelensky asked President Trump during their meeting to provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. Is that something we're prepared to do?
That would be a game changer.
That would be a game changer.
But, we don't know. So, Joe, I'm encouraged by the news this week.
Yeah.
Trump has had a major change. It's a major about face. The Ukrainians have never had a better relationship with Trump than they do at this moment, right? But Donald Trump didn't commit to anything new. It's just a rhetorical change. And with Trump, it's always about the money. Is he going to commit to more appropriations in Congress? At this moment, there's no signs that Congress is going to be doing something more. Tomahawk missiles would be a game changer, but also turning off, there's restrictions on U.S. weapons. So when we give Kiev weapons, we give them rockets. We tell them you cannot strike into Russia. There are limitations. DOD needs to remove those limitations. If DOD would remove those limitations, Trump can pick up the phone and call Hegseth right now and say, let the Ukrainians strike into Russia and hit the enemy lines. That would be a game changer. But we also have to provide sufficient missiles as well.
He's promised to not target civilians, which of course Vladimir Putin has. And getting back to the conversation, the talk about children, what's the path for their return short of a formal armistice agreement?
So the children are being returned right now, Joe.
Yeah.
I just got back from Kiev, and there's an amazing, one of my heroes, his name is Mykola Kaleba, and he's the CEO of Save Ukraine, and his organization is a nonprofit based in Kiev, and they have helped save more than 600 children. And each path is different, but they're able to contact the children once they've been abducted, and working with relatives and very fearless people. This is the Underground Railroad of the modern century, and they're able to get these children home and rebuild their lives. I would love to bring Mykola in and have a chat with him.
You've introduced us to some truly fascinating people from Ukraine. Many of them have told us such tragic stories here. They've been very emotional conversations. How much time did you spend in a bomb shelter when you were there on this last visit?
So I was in Ukraine when General Kellogg was there, and we talk about the Kellogg shield, right?
So they know better.
So when General Kellogg comes to Kiev, it's not so bad. But I spent 2 of 4 nights in the bomb shelter when I was there last month.
2 of 4 nights. This is still their reality, which is why Zelensky says this about the Kremlin. We want them to know what it's like to be in a bomb shelter every night. Will he accomplish that? Will he get this weapons system he's asking for?
I don't know. So this is when we have to get into speculating about Trump's behavior.
Right, that's right. And there's not much productive to be done there. Short of the tomahawks being delivered, though, what is the strategy for President Zelensky at the moment, short of trying to occupy Russian land and even the playing field? Militarily, what's his next step?
Okay, let's talk about the front lines.
Yeah.
So the front lines are not bad right now. The Ukrainians are holding the line, and there's a Russian offensive, an ongoing Russian offensive. The Russians are not making very much progress. The Ukrainians don't have enough men. They need more material, and the Europeans have committed to delivering that. They could use a lot more material from America, so we're looking at Trump there to send more over. But so far, the lines are holding. The Russian offensive will start to peter out around Christmas time.
Right, we've got the seasonal factor here.
Right. We have mud, we have leaves. We've all become meteorologists, Joe. So at Christmas time, the Russians have to reduce their air, their ground cover, because the leaves have fallen and they won't be able to use their aviation systems.
No foliage. Fascinating. This remains a war of attrition.
It remains a war of attrition, but the military experts expect this war to continue on. So the Kremlin wants to see what it can get, and it's going to continue. Mathematically, the Ukrainians could probably fight for another 18 months. There's a lot of ifs in there, but this war is going to continue.